Namaste. So in this lecture, we shall talk about types of movement. In previous lecture, we already talked about that what it takes to move, and in further classes, we will talk further about it. Right now, I'm going to talk about types of movement, which are really important to be understood when it comes to perform any type of asanas, any type of exercise. Even not only it will help you in your yoga asana classes, but it will also help you in your daily life exercises. When you are going to become teacher, when you are going to guide someone for any exercise, it is really important to understand these things which can really help you be safe into the practice and avoid injuries. So there can be much more types of movement, but right now I'm going to basically talk about these two movements, which are active and passive movement. Now remember, when I talk about movement, I'm not talking about overall position, neither I'm talking about any asana. I'm going to talk about movement which is belonging to a joint. So we have already talked about this previously, that when you are performing a position, that is a combination of many movements. So if you are going to talk about posture, whether it is going to be active or passive, that is different than what I'm going to talk here. If a posture is active or not, it will depend upon other factors. But right now, is a movement active or passive? Because in order to get into some position, you must have made some movement. Now the movement, has it been active or has it been passive? That will decide the overall posture. So what is active movement? Active movement is the movement which is unassisted. Unassisted means, let's say I want to move my hand up, and as you can see right now that I'm not taking any assistance to move. I mean, nothing is helping me. So when I'm doing this movement, my shoulder is moving right now, and it is only my shoulder, the same shoulder muscle, which are helping me do this movement. You can also do it for yourself right now, that if you try to raise your shoulder up and then touch your shoulder on top, you'll notice there's gentle tension there, because these are the main muscles which are helping you move this way. And these muscles which help you move in any direction you are moving into, especially when you are not using any assistance, these muscles are known as prime mover or agonist. So what is agonist muscle? Agonist muscle is the responsible muscle which contracts or engage when you move. So let's say, we can also say it this way, that prime mover is the muscle which will create the most force when you are moving in any direction. But make sure the movement you are performing is not being held by anything. Anything means it is not being held by gravity, it is not being held by other person, neither it is being held by other body part than the same. So same again, like now, okay, let's say if I bow my head down, now of course I have made an effort to bend, but you'll also notice that I do not really have to make too much effort to bend my neck, because gravity easily allows me to do it. But if I keep something against, if I keep my hand against my head and then I try to bring my head down, it will take me a lot more effort. So the more you make any movement unassisted and the more you move against some resistance, the more a movement will become active. And active movements in nature are strengthening. So let's say you want to strengthen your biceps, the muscle on your forearm. So what do? You don't just bend it like this. Rather, you first bend it with your own muscle, then you put weight and make it do harder and more engagement and contraction. And when that happens with greater intensity, then the muscle becomes stronger and it grows bigger in some cases. So it is important that if you want to be safe in practice, you must start your practice with active movements. Example, let's say you come to a yoga class and you want to practice for yourself, and let's say you want to do back bend. So it's not a good idea to do back bends like, like standing wheel pose or trying to walk to the wall. These movements, let's say I'm doing back bend like I'm bending backward like this. This will not really be a good warm-up, because in this way I'm making this movement assisted, right? In this way, gravity is helping me bend backward. And when gravity is helping me bend backward, gravity has no intelligence that how much and how my body should move, right? Well, there is a term, we call it, let me mention it here. This term is called proprioception. Proprioception means perception of joints to move, means how much and how a joint should move. It's only your body and your muscle, your joints, your nervous system, your mind can decide that for you. Something else which is outside the body cannot decide that how you should be moving and how you can move. So that is what I mean, that when you are moving active, you are not letting any other or additional force to come and help you. Well, I don't mean that it is wrong to use assistance or help, but in order to warm up, in order to strengthen, in order to make any exercise safe for you, better you start doing active movements, at least in the beginning, right? Let's say I have to teach you how to throw, right? Let's say you have stone or your ball in your hand and you're throwing the ball. Now what happens? If you have never thrown the ball before, and if you throw something with jerk, now this is no more active movement, because the moment you created a lot of force, there was momentum added to it. And when momentum comes into the movement from active start to become semi-active or semi-passive, and it goes towards passive movement. And the moment a movement becomes passive, it could be potentially risky and dangerous. You might have observed this happens, in many sports. For an example, it happens to runners. So let's say if you are running, and sometimes if you run too fast, if you leap too fast, sometimes many people injure their hamstring. Hamstring is the muscle behind the thighs. Many times people injure their hamstring because they are stretching their leg too hard, and it is happening because additional force I forgot to mention here is momentum as well. And when momentum is added to a movement somewhere becomes passive and assisted. And the moment a movement will become assisted, that could be a reason of injury. So let me just give you some other examples so it is clearer to you. So let's start with the head movement, okay? This is my neck. If I move my head this way, generally what should happen is, if my head is moving this way, it should be the muscle this side which should do this, right? But if you notice, if you bow your head this side and then you touch the same side muscle, it doesn't engage. The reason is the movement is not active. Because if the movement was active, the responsible muscle will have to contract. So how does it contract? If I lean this side, now if I do my head like this, now can you see that at this time this movement is being done against gravity, and I'm not using any assistance. It is completely unassisted. Gravity is pulling my head downward, but to keep it up I have to make effort. But staying in this position, if you bend your head this side, you'll notice that the muscle on this side becomes engaged and firm, because this movement is very much assisted. Now you may be wondering, then do I have to bend like this to make this movement active? Not really. What you can do is, you can place your palm against your head and gently resist your head with the hand, and then try to push your head against the hand. Or sometimes we just hold this, we press the head and head against each other, and what that does is it engages the muscle. And this exercise could really be helpful for people who have neck pain, do not want to move neck too much, but still want to gain some strength into the muscles. So this can be a real good exercise, that they can press their head against the hand so the muscle can get engaged, and it can help their neck feel little stronger and give them little more stability into the neck. So talking further about this, let's say if I talk about shoulder joint. So there is a movement, I raise my hand up. If you notice, if you touch your shoulder on top, it will be tense. But if I take my hand with the help of other hand, this hand will become active because this is making effort, but this hand is no more going to be active because this hand is moving because of this hand. So if I raise my hand like this, if if I touch this part here when it is supported, you can do it with the partner, you'll notice that this hand completely goes relaxed because the movement has become passive. Now what is passive movement in general? Passive movement will be the movement which will be assisted, means you will be using something to help you. It may be gravity. Like my hand is here, it comes down. What brings my hand down is gravity. But what brings it up is my own strength. It shows that it's me doing it. But if, let's say, I feel lazy and I don't want to do this, I ask somebody, raise my hand up. So who will get stronger? Who will get warm up? Who will gain the strength? It will be him, not me. When you move without using your muscles, that movement does not really help you strengthen you, but it may help you mobilize the joint, so it is okay. But if your goal is to warm up, heat up the body, if your goal is to strengthen, if your goal is to move safe, if your goal is to improve circulation and do some heart workout, which also gives you good stamina, which also brings endurance to you, you must be moving active. So, of course, many times we perform so many exercises where we can't be completely active, but we must be trying to become more active then. We should not let the assistance dominate our own strength, because if that happens, that could be potentially injurious to you. Or if that happens, it's not really useful to do that. Well, there are other factors that why we do passive, but let me first talk completely about active. Active movement should be done having the intention that you want to warm up, right? So let's say if I raise my hand up and bring it down. If I raise it up, bring it down. So this way I'm warming the shoulder muscle here because it is engaging. When muscle engages, relaxes, engages, relaxes, the engagement of muscle actually generates heat into the particular area, and when it warms up, it makes the body become much more supple and fluid to move. So most of the people, when they do back bend, they do these exercises, especially lying down on the belly. If you lie down on the belly and raise your hands up, so basically what you are doing is, you are doing back bend, but you are doing it actively without assistance. But if you are standing and then bend forward, at that time you are basically not using, you are using gravity to bend. That is why many people can cause lower back pain. It can hurt their shoulder sometimes. But when you're lying on the belly, then you try to raise your hands and raise your legs back, chances of lower back pain are less, but you may feel a little bit of tension because of the muscles engaging in your lower back. So being a practitioner, let's say you want to explore some movement. There's nothing bad in moving the other way. Like there's nothing wrong in moving passive. But if you want to be safe and if you want to know the potential of yours, whether you are able to move into some position or not. See, yesterday we talked, in previous session we talked about two different types of need from muscle. One was the strength and other is flexibility. Some people move into some movement because they are so flexible, but if we ask them to do the same movement actively, they fail to do it. And that shows the imbalance into the muscle. Example, we can do the example with the leg. If I raise my leg with my hand, chances are there that I can raise it higher. But some people, when they are asked, they can only lift it, they can barely lift it off the floor. Some people can really lift it higher, even at the level of nose. It means they have practiced it quite well and their strength is good enough to lift the leg. So there's nothing wrong in being passive, but in order to be safe, in order to feel the warmth, in order to make yourself prepared for any further positions which are even going to be passive, it is important that you move active, because active movements are considered the safest movement. Well, there are so many poses in yoga which has to be done passively. But if you want to, and that's where many people get injured. For an example, if we do an example of, let's say, lotus position, lotus position is one of the fancy position. Lotus position is the position where we cross the legs over each other like this. So when you are in lotus position, most of the people perform lotus by using their hand. They grab their foot, place it over the other thigh, they grab the other foot and place it over the other thigh. When they use a lot of force from hand and bend the knees and move the hip, sometimes that force which is assisted, which is your other body part moving your other body part, can also cause knee injury, ankle injury, and sometimes hip outer muscle pain. So in order to avoid those things, if you can try to perform lotus without using your hands, that can make you feel much more stable and safe, and your muscle engagement will keep your knee feel safe. Okay, so we shall be doing some practical examples here to understand the difference between these movements, and to understand that how potentially they could be beneficial and at the same time risky and dangerous. So into yoga asana classes, we have seen this, that many times we prefer a teacher to come to us and help us get into the posture deeply. Sometimes we want our, friends around us to help us get into a deeper position. Well, there's nothing wrong in that, but sometimes, as we just talked about this concept, proprioception, which means that your joint has, its own intelligence, that how much it should be moving. But when somebody else comes and helps you do the position, if you want to do it safely, you must do it gently. But if you do it forcefully, that could lead to injury. So we'll do some examples here. I have Parveen madam with me. I thank her to join me on the stage. So we shall be doing some examples here, and we'll understand it how it could be dangerous. So I would like to ask her to stand a little closer towards me and still face this side. I will ask her to raise one hand in front. Now, right now, this movement has completely been done by her, and I have not assisted her at all. If I ask her to raise her hand as much as she can and take her hand as much as she can, now, if I ask you or even her that is this movement going to be dangerous? What do you say? Do you think it is going to be dangerous? Well, not really dangerous, but it can make her feel tired. If I give her some weight and ask her to hold that position will make her feel much more challenged, and this will help her become stronger if she does this, repetitively many times. But let's say if I do the same movement for her, she relaxes completely. If she is relaxing and if I do this for her, first thing that will happen is she'll not be using the responsible muscle, which is prime mover. The muscle which was being used before when she did this movement herself will not be used at this time, because this movement is being assisted and it's me being assistant right now. What more will happen is if I keep on doing this movement for her, she'll not really be warming up, rather it'll be me who will be warmed up and tired perhaps, and I'll not want to help her anymore because she is too heavy for me. Okay, so further, let's see that if it is going to be safe. As we already saw before, that when she did it herself, of course injury could happen. I mean, sometimes we cannot avoid injuries in certain situations, but if you could make the movement in your control, chances of injuries will reduce to an immense extent. But let's say on the other hand, passive movement, right now I'm being the other person is being assistant, and I'm going to do this movement because my intention could be to stretch her muscles under arms. Then stretchings are generally cooling and they don't really makes you aggressive. If they are done too painfully, of course this could increase the stress into the body and could also make the person avoid that stretching. But if stretching is done gently, like if I do this movement for her gently, she may enjoy this movement. This movement can even become calming and cooling for her because she is not making any effort. Further, it could also be risky. In what case it could be risky? In the case that without communicating with her, if I keep on forcing this, and if I force too hard, because I have no intelligence, well, of course, this is common sense and there is an instinct that I will only move to the point where I think it is fine. But sometimes it happens that when there are some stiff people and we don't really listen to them sometimes because we say no pain, no gain, and I'll keep on forcing because I want to make her do a nice wheel pose or chakrasana, and for that she really need to have very flexible shoulder. And if I force this, she may tell me that it's enough. But sometimes it happens among friends. Sometimes it happens that it's okay, without pain you can't get better, so it's okay, don't worry, I have done the same, I have been through the same pain, don't worry, nothing will happen. And when you keep on doing that, perhaps chances are there the joint can be compressed too much. Maybe a lot of stretching to the muscle can happen. Maybe the bone could be out of its place and it can get dislocated. So if you want to avoid such injuries, make sure that most of the time the movement you perform must be active. And if you are attempting to do stretching, because stretching will not generally happen without making a movement passive, right? Well, stretching means basically stretching can also happen in active movements, but generally stretching is done with passive forces because the muscle itself has no ability to move itself. For an example, if I ask her to bend the elbow, let's say bend the right elbow. Right now, right elbow is bending because of biceps. It is stretching the triceps, but the biceps engagement is so much. The triceps will not really be felt as if it is stretching. Rather, it will relax. But if I want to stretch her, I would say bend the elbow hard and then take the elbow back. So most of the people stretch triceps like this. They use their other hand and then they try to bend the elbow. So right now she's using other hand to bend the elbow, and that might stretch your triceps a little bit. But if I say do it with your own effort, you may not feel the stretching. Similarly, if I want to stretch her upper back from behind and I say reach your hand forward yourself, both of the hands forward to stretch the back, there may be a little bit of stretch, but most of the tension will be felt in the front because she is doing this movement with active effort. But if I want to stretch her back, I may say that grab my neck and I help her push backward, and that may give her gentle stretching behind. So stretching is generally felt when you move passively. You can relax. In order to stretch a muscle, you have to most of the time move passively, but make sure, since muscles themselves don't stretch, they have to be stretched because of some other force. So make sure the force, the assistance like gravity, other person, other body part, or momentum, anything that you use, that shouldn't be used forcefully because the force could lead to injury. If you want to be safe in the practice, first thing, move active. If you want to be passive, be semi-active or semi-passive. If you completely be passive, make sure the movement you want to be passive in, try to keep that movement gentle and do not bring intensity to it. Otherwise, your joint will suffer or the muscle which is stretching could also be torn. So thank you very much for this session we have here. And in the next session, we shall talk about joint and its structure and components about it. And for the time being, keep this in your practice. I will give you homework here, and when we have live session, you can discuss with me. Your homework will be whatever posture we do. Now make sure when I'm saying posture, thanks to the madam, when I say that it's posture, I don't mean by movement. When I mean to say active or passive, I don't mean by posture. I mean by joint. Let's say if I raise my hands up and bend forward. And if I keep my head lifted up. Now you may say that this posture is active because I have lifted my chest up against gravity, but you also have to consider that in this posture, it is not just your spine which has moved, but your hip is also involved in this exercise or movement. So let's say I have bent forward from my hip and then I have lifted my chest. In this posture, this is active and passive both, but when it comes to talk about movement, we have to consider different joints which are involved. For an example, hip. Hip in this movement is passive because gravity has made myself bend forward. That is why I feel stretch into my back of the legs. But when I have lifted my chest up, it has made my back of the muscle become active because I'm lifting my head against gravity. So when it comes to talk about a posture, we are not talking about, when it comes to talk about active and passive or movement, it is not about overall position, but about a particular joint. So you have to consider it in this way, and your homework will be that you have to go through different asanas, like from sun salutation that you're learning into your Ashtanga or Vinyasa. Go through different asanas and try to notice what kind of movement you are performing and how you can teach it to others. Namaste.